infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
Welcome to another episode of Into the Fray. If you're new here, I hope you're enjoying it enough to head to your podcatcher of choice to rate and review the show. This helps it aggregate across the listening platforms, which will turn into more people willing to come on and share their encounters. If you've been listening for years, I'd ask that you please do the same. Home base for Into the Fray is intothefrayradio.com. There you will find all episodes, blog posts, and get bonus content info. Speaking of that bonus content, on top of the free weekly show, I also produce bonus content for Patreon and Apple Podcast Premium. On either platform, you get all bonus audio episodes and early releases, each one ad-free, of course. Full disclosure though, Patreon has a bit more in the way of perks because of their interface. Over there, you will get video versions of patron-only chats, a private Discord channel, and merch at certain pledge levels. So head to patreon.com/intothefray or your Apple Podcatcher app to sign up for bonus content today. You can find me on the big three social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The Linktree link in each of my bios will take you to all the places you want to venture regarding ITF, including Small Town Monsters documentaries, various ways to listen to the show, Beyond the Fray books, contact info for me, and more. And lastly, and really honestly most importantly, if you'd like to share your encounter or encounters on Into the Fray, the best way to get in touch is by emailing me at shannon@intothefrayradio.com. And without further ado, let's get to the interview. So on this episode of Into the Fray, I welcome Denise on with me, and she is on for what will be my very first full-on animal communication episode in regards to animal communication, communicating with those other family members that we love so much that are feathered and furred and scaled, all of that. And Denise, first of all, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Shannon, for having me.
I wanted to start off with my experience with you because when you reached out to me, you let me know that, hey, I want to do a session with you so you get a feel for what I do before I come on the show. And I will say, and everyone, maybe, they don't realize I am at heart skeptical. Yes, I talk about a lot of this stuff day in and day out, but it doesn't mean that I'm not skeptical. And I was. But I will say, and you know how this rolled because you were on the call. We picked 4 of my birds, and I'm not going to go into a whole long thing because this is more about you and your experiences with your other clients. But I wanted to tell you that when we got into it, I was wondering, well, I just don't know how this is going to go because all she has is pictures of these 4 of my birds and their names, right? And you got in touch with them. We'll get into more of that, how your process works after this. But once you got into it, the details, as far as each bird's personality went, I was so floored that a couple different points, I think you're kind of going, are you still there, Shannon? Are you okay? Because I was just so stunned, and I was furiously making notes while this is going on. I was so stunned by what you were saying because to me, And this is the blanket statement that'll take care of everything, because without you living in this home, I mean, probably for several weeks, really, at least several weeks, if not more, you would not have known each bird's personality to a T like you did. And that's why I was stunned into utter silence while we were on the call, because as you're just moving through and I was just listening, because at the end, then you allowed me to ask questions of the birds. But I was so floored that I'm going, okay, this is 100% real. Denise can do this. This just happened. And you executed it flawlessly, to, like I said, to the point where I'm going, how could you know this without living in my house with me and all of these crazy, lovely, wonderful birds? So I just wanted to give you that shout out, because right out of the gate, I am a convert. Animal communication is real.
Well, thank you, Shannon. Yeah, you did scare me because you were so quiet. I was like, does that sound like your birds? Did I get it wrong? I mean, am I completely off base on this? So yeah, you did scare me. But yeah, I'm a skeptic too. I'm actually a biologist, but a little open-minded biologist, because a lot of things have happened to me over the years. And animal behavior is one of my topics that I just love. And yeah, I was skeptical at first, but animals have just shown me over and over and over again that this is real, and you can communicate with them. You can come to understanding, right, how to live better in your home with them, how to even talk to wildlife. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a wild ride. And thank you for those kind words. I consider myself basically the conduit of talking between the human and the animals that live with them, and vice versa. So I'm kind of like the interpreter trying to interpret a foreign language, because animals don't speak in words generally. They show you pictures and feelings and body sensations. And so I have to interpret that and bring it to the human, and then back. So I enjoy it. I have a lot of fun with it. Do a lot with wildlife. Really like to talk to them. So thank you for that.
No, and thank you. Yeah, I was utterly blown away by the stuff that you were telling me. That was really, truly incredible. And it did help me in my path to learning my birds more as far as what they need, and also trying to just communicate on whatever level we can to make, their lives easier and my lives easier. Parrots can be a handful, lots of animals can be a handful, and there's that breakdown in communication, so that definitely helped. And I'm still, by the way, implementing the things that you said that I should be doing just every day, just to help the all-inclusiveness of the home, which can be very important. So Denise, I wanted to start with what I'm assuming is bullet point number 1 on your list, and that is, how did you find out that you could do this?
Right, right. Well, like I was saying, I probably got into science and biology just because I want to know. I always want to know, how does the universe work? How does this work? How does that work? Why do animals do what they do? And so as a kid, I was always watching. Now, back when I was a kid, we only had 3 channels, living in the woods. So, you watched everything you could about animals, and it was usually Wild Kingdom. I don't know how many people know about Wild Kingdom, but it's one of my favorite shows. And then I would act out the animals afterwards. I would study how they behaved, try to understand their motivations for what they were doing. And I was always trying to be an animal. Little did I know that was going to help me later to be an animal communicator. And I do want to say that anybody can do this. It is a lost art. Most children do it very well, and then we basically teach them not to in school. So everybody can do this on some level or another. We are all psychic. So and then, like I said, there's been things that have happened through my life, and I started opening my mind more, and it wasn't all just rigid science. And then a friend of ours started talking about a friend of hers that was an animal communicator. And I was like, what? Like Dr. Doolittle? I was just, I was kind of making fun of it. And I was like, oh, this person doesn't sound like she's all together upstairs. And then I met her personally, and she seemed like a real person, right? She was funny. She was open. I'm like, okay, well, all right. She's not a crazy wacko. And when she offered a class in my city, I thought, well, I'll check it out. And so from the very first class, it was like basically Animal Communication 101. everything. She brought like 4 of her own animals, and we worked with them, and then she actually did work with a photograph off a photograph that each of us brought of our animals, and the stuff that came through was just like, "Okay, there's something going on here." So I continue to take her classes, and she does a series, at least used to do a series of 3, and they're all in person. So it was a few months later, sometime in the summer, we went to a wildlife refuge rescue area, and lots of birds, other small mammals, and just all kinds of wonderful things happened there too. So the third class is the one that is my number one on the list. And I don't remember exactly how I wrote it. I have it here as notes as pigs, a dove, and a mouse. Basically, that changed my life. I was like, okay, this is real, and I am hooked. I have to learn how to do this. And so that was the day that I basically consider changed my life. I mean, my jaw dropped several times that day, and they were some things were very personal. Others I heard from other people. So yeah, this actually happened at a farm rescue place here in Oregon. I live in Oregon. So we spent probably about 5 or 6 hours. Got there about 10 or 10:30 in the morning. Had lunch, and then we left about 3 that day. And I'd already had 2 classes under my belt, so I knew kind of, what we were supposed to do in terms of connecting with the animals. So that morning, as we approached, my sister was actually in the class with me. When we got to the location, they had an aviary outside, and we went over to look at the birds, just waiting for the class to start. And we saw in the aviary that there was a mourning dove in there, and it looked pretty beat up. You could actually see a little bit of dried blood around its head, some feathers were missing. And, we just figured somebody found the poor thing. It couldn't fly probably, because we actually saw it walking around on the ground. And, they were trying to get it restored to health and then would release it. Later that day, as we were having lunch, the bird showed up on the ground, just came flying in and showed up on the ground. And the teacher, my mentor, started talking to the bird, and it was calling out the name of the person that runs the rescue. And the bird was trying to say, I want Wayne. I want Wayne. That's what the guy's name. And then a farm cat showed up. So we asked the bird to leave because it was dangerous for him to be there because the cats are around, and it took off. And we basically indicated to the bird through our teacher that come back at a safer time and we will find Wayne so that, whatever needs to happen for you can happen. At the end of the day, we're standing around after the class is over, standing around visiting. And I'm facing my sister, and there's somebody next to me, and we're visiting, saying goodbye. And that dove flew in and landed on my sister's head. And we were just like, oh my gosh, this is just crazy. And my sister reached up and just grabbed the dove. It didn't struggle. And we called Wayne over, and we're like, Wayne, here's the bird that we told you about. And he had actually had no idea how that bird got into that cage, and actually had let it out earlier in the day. So they took it back over to the aviary because it obviously needed some more support. And it didn't even want to leave my sister's hands, but she gently put it down, and we're assuming that it recovered and eventually flew away. But for that bird to come in and land on my sister's head, a safe place at the end of the day, that just floored me. That was quite an interesting part of the day.
That's very cool.
Yeah, yeah. So the thing that happened with the pigs, and this is what really shocked me that day, was after we probably talked for about a half hour after the start of the class, she said, go off and find a farm animal and connect. And so I wandered over to an area where they had some pigs. And there was one of those woven fences between me and the pigs. And they were laying in the sun. It was kind of a chilly, starting to be fall. So it was kind of a chilly morning. So they were laying in the sun in their pen. And they had a pretty large area. So they had an area to go in barn and a big field. And I sat down quite a ways away because I didn't want to sit right next to them and bother them if they didn't want me there. So I moved down the fence and just sat down and noticed that they were like chewing something, or something was in their mouths, like they were cows and chewing cud. But I could hear it rattling around, and I was like, what are they eating or what are they chewing? And they just kept doing this. They weren't swallowing or anything. So my biologist took over and I'm like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to sit here and watch these pigs until I figure out what the heck they have in their mouths. So I was probably doing that for about 15 minutes. And then I remembered my instructor's information, which is ground yourself, breathe, and ask the animal, right? And see what comes back. And so I'm like, oh, yeah, duh. And so I did that. And I swear, Shannon, the pig got up, and these are big animals. So it wasn't like it just bounced up. It took a while for it to get up. It walked over to me and dropped what it had in its mouth out onto the ground. And I was just flabbergasted. My mouth was open. I was like, oh my gosh. And what it had in its mouth was gravel, because there was a lot of gravel driveways in the area. And it had been picked up, these sharp gravels, about the size of grapes. And it had about 6 or 7 of those in its mouth. And that's what I could hear rattling around in its mouth. And I was like, oh my gosh. So that worked so well. So I asked the pig, why the heck do you have gravel in your mouth? You can't eat it. And I got the impression I saw, and this is called symbolism, I saw myself rubbing a worry stone. And so I got from that they just put in their mouths, and it's just a way to relax and just, get things out of their mind and just, rub the worry stone. And that was just incredible to me. So then the lunch bell rang, time for lunch. So we went and had our lunch. And after that, she said, go out and practice some more. And I was like, oh, I had such good communication with the pigs. I'm going to go back to them. So this time they were in their barn. And so when I walked in, it was a cement floor. They had a pretty tall fence in front, but it was steel, inch wide square bars, right? Keep the pigs in and from pushing on it. And there was a lot of straws. Lots of pigs were laying in the straw. And again, I could see that they were chewing on something. I could hear it rattling. So I asked one of the pigs, do you have, are you rattling, rocks in your mouth? And she walked over to the fence, tipped her head sideways, and carefully placed one of those rocks on that steel bar. And my mouth again was just like, oh my gosh. And I took it as a present. So I picked it up and I looked at it and I thanked her for showing me. And then I gave it back to her, and she carefully took it out of my fingers and put it back in her mouth. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is just crazy. And then another pig walked over at that time, and they were making little piggy noises, grunting and cuddling with each other. And I'm like, are you guys friends? What's the relationship here? And I heard mother and daughter. And right away I doubted myself, because nobody keeps, families of pigs together. That's just crazy. And so later in the afternoon, Wayne came in and he told us stories about the different animals. And we asked him questions, what's the story with the pigs? What's the story with this animal? And it turns out that these were pigs that were rescued in the Mississippi flood. And it was like 3 sows and a bunch of their piglets. So there really was, mother pigs with their babies still as adults now living together on this rescue farm. So that just blew me away. Another thing that happened is the mouse story. So during lunch, we told each other stories about what had happened to us while we were out talking to the animals. And it's very rare. I wish it happened more, but it's very rare for men to show up to these classes, unfortunately. But a husband and wife did come. And so this was a gentleman who had wandered into one of the barns. Now the animals can kind of like come and go and get food, lay down in the straw, do whatever they want. A lot of them have pretty much free range around the farm. And so he went into one of these pole sheds and was sitting on a bale of hay. There was sheep and goats on one side. I think there was a huge boar. I've never seen a pig that big before, but this huge boar was like sound asleep in the straw. And he was sitting there trying to connect with the animals. And he told us that he heard someone say, over here, over here. And so he's looking around at everybody, and, nobody seems to be paying any attention to them. And he notices movement along the wall behind a piece of plywood. And he sees this little mouse. And so he basically asks the mouse, was that you that was just talking to me? And of course the mouse responds yes, or in some manner lets him know yes. And he's not believing this, right? He's like, there's no way this mouse is talking to me. So she goes behind the plywood and comes back out, and she's got one of her pink little babies, and she lays it down on the 2x4 that's part of the wall. And he's just watching this, and she goes and gets another one and brings it out to show him. And she showed him three of her little pink babies, and he could not believe it. And then she put them all away, and he had this beautiful conversation with her. And I'm watching this guy tell this story, and tears are streaming out of his eyes because he's like, I never imagined that a mouse would talk to me when I'm trying to talk to these big farm animals. And he was just blown away. So that was the day that okay, this is real. Magic happens with these animals, and you can communicate with them.
I mean,
You have any questions?
yeah, it makes sense with the pigs because the people don't realize how smart pigs are, and it would make sense
They're very intelligent.
they would have worries. So then they would use something like you said, rubbing on a worry stone, or how people hold worry dolls, right, and sticking them under their pillows to try to alleviate any worries. So that makes sense with the pigs.
Yeah, I was just blown away. So that from that point on, I was like, I just have to learn all I can. And that I wished I had taken. I'm not a big writer, like writing in a diary. I do now whenever I go on trips and I'm working with animals and things like that. I keep a good diary of the things that have happened. But so I don't remember the exact year, but I want to say it was probably 2009 or 2010 when those classes were occurring. And I took those classes over again. I went to her mentoring circles, which were usually live or on the phone, where we got to practice. And then in 2012, I was accepted into an apprenticeship, which was a very intense year-long study of communicating with animals. And then I was done with that in 2013, and basically set up a small business. I'm actually a full-time biologist. I actually have a master's in fisheries, so I work with fish and the issues out here in the Pacific Northwest with salmon. But this is kind of on the side, and I work with people and their animals. So that was the day that just changed my life.
Well, next up, you wanted to cover learning and validation points.
Yeah. So another another thing that happened for validation, that I mean, anybody can do this, right? You can sit down, ground yourself, and just be in the moment. You have to be in the moment. You can't be thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow at work, or what happened to me yesterday at work. What am I going to get somebody for their birthday? You have to be in the moment, and you have to be grounded, and just enjoy the moment, and then things will happen. So I was practicing that during the apprenticeship, and I had a horse at the time, and I was up at the horse property, and they had this beautiful field with trees and open areas with grass. So I just found a log to sit on, and was sitting on the log and just enjoying the day. It was a beautiful summer day. And gosh, I was probably about 15 minutes into it. I was just meditating and watching the horses graze. There was a little Palomino pony and a big black horse, probably about 50 yards from me, just out in the sun grazing. And they paid me no attention whatsoever while I sat on that log, until I started communicating with them. I just started saying, hey, you're beautiful. I'd love to meet you. Can you show me that you are hearing me? And as soon as that thought entered my mind, the little Palomino pony picked up her head and she walked straight to me. And and the interesting thing is this little pony, she's quite a fierce little nasty thing. She'd kick everybody, all the other horses, right? And bite them. So I didn't really think of her as that sweet of an animal until she came over and started basically just being in my space, and us just sharing the moment together. And I realized at that time that it was mostly about fear. She'd rather bite and kick instead of somebody attacking her. And so our relationship actually changed at that moment. And just to make sure, because again, I'm a skeptic. The universe has to show me multiple times that something is really true. I then called. Now the black horse never moved; he was still grazing, and I reached out again and said, if you can hear me, can you please show me that I'm connecting? And he did the same thing. As soon as I thought that, lifted his head, turned, and walked straight to me. So now I had two horses that were, you know, that I was petting and nuzzling with and just having a good time. So those kind of validations, um, again, it just keeps reinforcing that you are connecting to the animals. What else did you say on there? I can't remember. It was validation.
On the list is also the practice with a rabbit.
Oh, right. Yes. So that was another thing. We needed to go out and live practice as we got further in our apprenticeship, live practice with people. I don't usually go to people's homes anymore. I do it all by phone, but we were supposed to go to people's homes and practice. So I went to a friend's house, and she has a little dwarf rabbit. He was black and white. At the time, I'm forgetting his name. And so I sat down to communicate with this little rabbit. And we talked about a variety of questions. I usually have my clients ask questions, and I check in with the animal. At one point, she asked about her boyfriend and the rabbit's relationship. And I clearly saw, and animals have a pretty good sense of humor. Most of them are just there to enjoy life. And so, yeah, their humor really comes out. This little rabbit shows me from his point of view now, from the ground, these huge feet, like 13, 14, size feet, always stumbling over him. And he's just fed up with it. He's just like, can't this guy control his own feet? And so I expressed that to the person, and she's like, you got it. That's exactly what happens. My boyfriend is always stumbling over my poor rabbit. And so, again, that was validation. And the rabbit is not allowed up on the furniture, but he instantly hopped up and just wanted to come and see who I was and sniff me. And he gave me a few licks. And it was just the sweetest afternoon. And so, again, more validation about connecting. And that's why when I worked with you, one of the things I do is I meditate about a half hour before I do a communication session. And I ask for the photographs. I want to usually know their names so I can actually call them by their names, their age, although that's not always that important, their sex. And I rarely want to, I want to kind of know the topics that we're going to go, like we're going to discuss an illness, but I don't want any details other than that because I don't want to get in my head. So I sit and do a meditation. And during that meditation, part of it is greeting the animals so they know who I am and why I'm coming to talk to them. With your four birds, basically most animals are four-legged that I talk to, but I think I told you this is the first time I really worked with a client with birds. So I enter a field and I just let my mind go wherever it needs to go and what the animals want to show me. And I talk to your African gray parrot first, and then I talk to your cockatoo, and then I talk to the conures. And the conures actually ended up in the tree. So a tree suddenly appeared and they were in the tree. But I spent about 5 minutes with each animal, getting to know their personalities and what they want to show me about who they are, and then letting them know, showing them who I am. And then I go on to do more meditation. But your birds, they all show me very different personalities. And I don't think I've ever had even dogs or cats, any animal act the same way. They all show me different things. So I'm always pleasantly surprised at what comes through, and how the animals act. And then that's a nice icebreaker when I start a session, because I can say, hey, while I was meditating, I got this from this bird, and so on, so that I know I'm connecting. So I've connected with that animal. So yeah, when I was talking to your birds, yeah, they were all so different in their personalities. When you finally got out of your silence, you confirmed that was indeed how they are. In fact, your two conures were very different. One was very happy to see me, and the other wanted to bite me. So very different. And again, it's just confirmation then that I know that I'm connected, and I can move forward.
And
with the session.
can I just say, and obviously people might be listening and going, well, she knew what kinds of birds these are. She probably just Googled, cockatoo personality and African gray personality. Yes, when you Google things, each species has, these personality traits. However, there were some such specific things, which I'm not going to get into here, but there were such specifics that has nothing to do with Denise Googling something, or you just know something about how crazy cockatoos are, or there was some very specific items that she mentioned about each and every one of these birds that she covered. That is the reason I was so quiet. It really blew me away. Yes. Like the biting. I was like, yep, that's the biter. Yep, you got it.
Yeah,
And as she said,
yeah,
two conures, completely different personalities.
yeah. He was, when I walked up to him, he was just like, he moved back and he was like, "Ugh," and I reached up and I was like, "You don't want me to touch you, do you?" And he was like, "No, I might even bite you." So I'm like, "Okay, okay, I'll leave you alone." But yeah, your other conure was just dancing along the branch and just so happy to see me. And just again, like I said, two very different birds entirely. So yeah, when I work with people, I will bring that up, what I got in meditation, to make sure that I am connected with their animals. This ability is not about having everything perfect and exact. I mean, nobody can really do that. Come in and say, this is exactly what happens at this time of the day and such and such. It's really about getting to know your animal better, understanding what their needs are, and often you can resolve issues between the human and the animal because you can relay each of their feelings back to the other one and say, well, this is what happens when this when you do this, your human feels sad, and that makes them sad. Is there any way that we can, is there something different we can do to help you not do that behavior? And it really helps the humans and the animals see each other in a different light, I would say. And I tell you what, lots of animals, I've heard this from people, when their humans connect with them like that psychically, it really changes that relationship. They're like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you actually reached out to talk to me and understand me." And just the sheer fact of doing that, animals will do something different. Like I've had people say, "My animal followed me around all day," and they never do that. Right after we had that session. And so they show their appreciation in many ways.
Have you ever had an occurrence where you tried to greet an animal, whatever kind of animal it may have been, and it said, please leave. I do not feel like talking to you. Where you couldn't get close enough to have that session.
Right. No, I have not yet. I'm sure that may occur in the future, or they're just not willing. Some animals are just more shy than others. Some are more skilled than others. Talking to a puppy versus an older dog, you often can get, not always, you'll get more that puppy head, right? Where they're just all over the place and can't focus, where an older dog has more experience and is able to convey better what it is that's going on. Sometimes it's hard for animals to talk about any kind of illness or pain they're in. So you may not get that very clear. Like happens a lot for dogs. They'll often forget because they're in pain. They'll forget they have a hind end. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to look at it. And so when you ask, can you show me how your back end feels? Show me you walking. You just get blank. So you need to know how to get past that and convince the animal to show you so that you can get them some help. Maybe they need acupuncture or massage, or their hip is out, or it's arthritis and they need something from the vet to help out. So that can happen where you just get blank. So you have to come in from different angles to try to get the answer from them,
Well, and
if that makes sense.
speaking of health issues, let's talk a little bit about your dog.
So this is another confirmation to me that this stuff really works. I don't even think I was Yeah, this had to have been early when I was just learning about animal communication. I actually used my mentor to do a session with one of my dogs. She was a dachshund. She's no longer with us. And a lot of times I'll have folks just ask it. It might not even have been part of the discussion, but once we got into the session and information's going forward, they're like, you know what, let's check out what they have to say about their health. Is there anything you can see health wise? So I think that's how this came up, because I wasn't looking for it. I didn't know my dog even had an issue, but the person I was working with as an animal communicator started to do a body scan. I usually like to start and just say to the animal, show me whatever it is you want about your body that's bothering you, and they'll bring things forward. And then I'll do a whole body scan if the person wants to do that, where you start at the nose and you work your way to the end, asking questions. So this animal communicator was doing that, and they said, well, your dog's showing me that when they eat, sometimes they get a real zing one of their teeth. Like, you hit it like a tooth is sensitive in some way. I don't know how many folks have felt that, but you bite down and all of a sudden your mouth is like electrified. So that's what she was feeling. And it didn't happen all the time, but every once in a while. And so I said, okay, well, it was like February, and our vet always had like, half off on dental work in February. So I said I would take my dog in and see if they find anything. And again, I had never saw my dog have an issue eating. She never showed us outward that she was having an issue with a tooth. But sure enough, there was a cracked molar and it needed to come out.
Wow.
So that was another confirmation to me that, oh my gosh, this really works. And I wouldn't have known about it. It could have gotten infected, could have been a lot worse eventually. But that animal communicator was able to find it and show us, and we got her some help.
What about on the list here? You mentioned your chickens.
Yes. So I had chickens for about 10 years. I don't have any right now. But during my apprenticeship, I worked with, there was 5 of us in the apprenticeship. So we had each other to work with and practice on each other's animals and things like that. I had 2 chickens from the first batch that we had raised. So we can have 3 chickens in the town that I am. And one of them had passed away. Actually, a hawk had got it. And so I was introducing a third chicken into the group. I got her not as a young chick because I would have had to raise her alone and I didn't want her to be alone. So I got her as a pullet. So she's about half grown. And I was trying to introduce her to the other 2 chickens. So I'd have a pen out there next to their pen. And then I'd go out and sit with them and let them run the yard together. And one of my other chickens, her name was Luna, she did not like her at all. And I mean, we spent weeks trying to get them all to, cohabitate. She would run all the way across the yard and attack her. And there were many times I had to pull her off the poor new chicken, which we called Aurora. And it was just day after day of this. And I'm like, what is going on? And I tell you what, when you're an animal communicator, you do definitely have a different types of relationships with your animals. But because you're so close to the situation, sometimes just like a doctor shouldn't treat their relatives, we can't always be clear on what's going on with our own animals. So I asked a couple of my apprentice friends that were in the apprenticeship with me to help me talk to Luna and figure out what is going on with her. Why will she not accept Aurora into the group? And I mean, she would just nail this poor little chicken all the time. I mean, I'd have to grab her, pull her off, and it was just like she couldn't help herself. She'd just get triggered just seeing her. And so I had 2 people help me too. And the things that came up for her were, first off, she was very concerned about the order in the group. There is a pecking order in chickens. It is actually a true thing that happens for them. She did not want to be at the bottom. She liked her position right now where she was just second in line, and she did not want to end up at the bottom. So we talked to her about that. We said, well, we don't know how it's going to work out, but if you're going to keep beating up on her, that's not, she's probably going to retaliate at some point. She's going to get large enough and she will retaliate. And then she was concerned about the food. There's not going to be enough food. And I assured her I would add more food so that everybody got all the food they wanted. And then the third thing she didn't like was the room on the roost. Was she going to be crowded on the roost? So we talked to her about that and assured her she gets to decide where she wants to be on the roost. You just have to stop beating up on this poor chicken. And Shannon, the next day, Luna didn't even look at her. She'd just walk right by her and didn't even pay her no mind. I was like, okay, if I hadn't known animal communication works, I would have believed it at this point. And there was no problem after that. I could put them all in the same cage together. They slept together. They ate together. There was no issues whatsoever after that. I mean, yeah, there's a little pushing and shoving and, this and that, but not total beat up this chicken and try to kill it. It was just amazing to me. And so, yeah, so they lived together happily after that. It was total problem solved.
It was nearly chicken bliss. That must have been, I mean, at points like that, though, don't you at least give yourself a little pat on the back? I mean, it seemed like they were going to fight to the death at some point. And then after all that little chit chat with Luna's like, all right, we're cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and again, just because I reached out and communicated with her, that's half the battle sometimes, right? Just your animal knowing that you're paying attention to them and that you're trying to solve it, often alone will just change behaviors. And so, yeah, she just had some, and we named her after the Harry Potter character, and she really was a little loony. So just trying to just tell her how we were going to change my behavior, right? That I'm going to make sure there's always food there. And, being more kind to this chicken will probably, not have her beat up on you later when she's twice your weight or something as she grows up. So, just reasoning with her and letting her know what's going to happen just took away all her fears about this other chicken coming into the group.
We all just want to be heard, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Those are two really, can I honestly say that? Those are two huge stories of validation, though, about it working. I mean, a cracked tooth in the back of the dog's mouth, how in the world would you ever know that, right? I mean...
Yeah, I certainly didn't notice any behavior. She's not a finicky dog. She'd just chow her food down. So I never noticed that, she stopped for a moment and didn't want to eat anymore because her tooth just went zing. So yeah, another thing that happened, and I was going to bring this up later, I do have a list of things just in general to say about how folks can have a better relationship and communicate with animals. But one of the things I often tell folks, and I probably even told you this at the end of the session, one thing I try not to do, it's very human of us, is to use the word don't. Don't get up on the counter, don't be hitting your sister, because the word don't rarely works. And when you're communicating with animals, they're not hearing the words necessarily. They're getting your emotion and what you're picturing psychically. So if you say, don't jump on the counter to a cat, what are you thinking? What are you picturing? You're picturing the cat getting up on the counter. So I often say to folks, say what you mean. Don't say what you don't want. So again, don't use the word don't. And I got that validated to me once with a crow. I was out walking my dog, had made it very far from the house, and she was sniffing around, thinking about peeing on somebody else's pee. And I noticed two crows were sitting in a tree right up above us. And I said to the crow, don't poop on me. And instantly, one of the crows flew over to the wire, which is right above me, the phone wire, electric wire, and pooped on my shoulder and then flew back to the tree. And I was like, well, at first I was not happy because now I had bird crap on my shoulder. But then I started laughing. I'm like, okay, I asked for that one, didn't I? I used the word don't, and I pictured you flying over me and pooping on me. So again, validation that animals do hear what you have to say.
Okay, so I have a question about that though, right? Because you are more tapped in because you've practiced and honed your craft in this
Right.
than most other people. If I was making that same walk and had that same thought, because I'm not as tapped in, that may not have happened. But because you are, more likely had a bigger essential target on your shoulder than maybe I would have. Is that correct, or am I off base on that?
I would say yes and no. It just depends on what state of mind you're in. And like I said, if you're walking down the street and your mind is scattered and you're thinking about work and you're thinking about a conversation you just had with somebody and you're not in the moment, animals are living their lives in the moment. They rarely think about the future and they don't always want to think about the past. And so they're in the moment. So if you are in the moment, just enjoying being alive or doing what it is you're doing, and you reach out, you're grounded, you reach out, you talk to an animal, you likely will get some kind of response. Now, wildlife, it's iffy. They're wild. They're just going to do what they want to do. Your animals around you that you have relationships with, you're more likely to get them to respond than wildlife. Not to say that wildlife won't, especially wildlife that lives with us in urban settings. They're tapped into humans more than wildlife out in the forest that rarely see humans. But you still can get responses. So it really depends on where you are in your being, right? You're in the
Mm-hmm.
moment, you're intending to make connections, and it can happen. So anybody can do it. You really can.
So we just talked quite a bit about domesticated animals. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the wilder ones, as you just said. So how about the story with the dolphins?
So my mentor and friend swims with wild dolphins every year. She just loves it. She goes and gets dolphin high every year. So I had actually been on a trip to the Bimini, which is off in Florida. There's a company there called Wild Quest, and beautiful people, beautiful setting, lovely food. And then they take you out on their catamaran every day. The dolphins wish it and want you to get in the water and play. You get in the water and you play with dolphins. It's just very, very cool, magical. Total tropical water, right? You can see through the water to 50 feet below the sandy bottom. It's just a beautiful place. So we had actually gone and seen the dolphins. Lots of magic happened on my first trip there, which was really our graduation for the apprenticeship. So I did that in like 2013. A couple years later, I went back because my teacher and mentor would take a group every year, like 20 people, to this place, and we go out and play with the dolphins. So these are a whole bunch of like-minded people. Several people are already animal communicators. So it was a trip in 2015 to Bimini to swim with the dolphins. And this particular day, the sea was just like glass. There was no waves whatsoever. And the dolphins were feeding. They were finding animals in the sand using their sonar. And we spent, gosh, 3 hours, 3.5 hours with them that day, just floating around and playing with the dolphins. I never got out of the water once. And I just laid on the surface of that water with my fins and snorkel and mask and just watched the dolphins. So many times they would be down feeding below me, and you could hear their clicking and their sonar going off. And you can watch them, they'll circle with their nose pointed at the sand. And basically, they're trying to find the animal that they want, and then they stun it with their sonar, and then they can dig in and just pull it out and eat it. And so I'd watch them do that for a while, and then they'd start coming to the surface. Now they could be easily 20, 50 feet down and 20 feet over. And I'd start calling to them and say, would you like to come meet me? I would say 80% of the dolphins wanted to do this. And we were doing this over and over again for 3 hours. They'd turn and just start swimming right towards you. And I tell you what, the first time that happened, it freaked me out because here comes a very large animal that could hurt you, especially with their sharp nose, swimming right at you. And I'm like, oh, wait, I asked for this to happen. Go down and. So I swim down and maybe 10 feet at the most, and then come up with the dolphin side by side. And we just did this over and over and over again. It was just a magical day. And sometimes the dolphins I wouldn't see them, I couldn't hear them. And there was actually a couple nurse sharks that were feeding very much in the same manner, where they're using their sensory to find electric currents from animals, and then they'll dig them out of the sand. So I'd watch the nurse sharks doing their feeding, and I was just enjoying it. And then I'd hear clicking again, and I'd see the dolphins, and I'd call to them as they were coming to the surface for a breath, and then we just join each other and swim to the surface. At one point, I saw a barracuda, and it was a pretty large one, and it was just hanging out on the bottom, and it was freaking me out because I wasn't afraid that it was going to bite me, but if there was they have been known to attack shiny things on people, divers, people on boats. And it was freaking me out. So I'm like, I actually called out to the dolphins, could somebody come and take care of this barracuda? And within 5 minutes, I saw this juvenile dolphin chase this barracuda off. It was nipping at its tail, and it chased it out of, and I never saw the barracuda again that day. So that was pretty cool. It was getting to the end of the day, and I probably swam like that with at least 20 dolphins throughout the 3 hours that I was in the water. And of course, like I said, watching nurse sharks and just watching behavior in general. And it was the end of the day, and they're calling us back to the boat. And there was a younger teenage dolphin coming to the surface. And I asked him or her if I could swim with him, meet up. And we swam. He was coming towards me. I was coming towards him. And we joined up. And I've never had a dolphin do this before or since. He then scanned me with his sonar. And I was looking right in his eye. I mean, we were only 6 inches apart. And I could feel it vibrating in my chest. And that was just like, oh my gosh, that was so magical. And so I came bursting out of the water and flopped on my back. And I didn't know this, but they told me this later. The dolphin actually leaped out of the water as I was basically leaping out of the water, the best I could as a human being. It was just so magical, so magical. I would highly recommend anybody that are into just communicating and being with animals to take the trip with Wild Quest. It's just a magical place. Very beautiful place.
Now, how about the crow and the walnut?
So we have in the city that I live in, lots of different trees can grow here. Lots of walnut trees. In the fall, you often see the crows taking the walnuts and then trying to drop them to the ground, to the pavement, and breaking them open. So they'll do this over and over again. So I was out for a walk, sunny fall day, walking with the dog and my spouse. We could see these crows up ahead trying to do that, pick up the walnut. And I don't know why our walnuts here, have very thick shells. And just watching this poor crow pick it up, fly up, drop it, pick it up, fly up, drop it. So I sent out a message ahead of me and said, if you want our help to get that nut open, please show me and drop the walnut in front of me, and I'll get it open for you. And I had forgotten I put that request out there because, we're looking at flowers, along the way. The dog has to do this. We're picking up her poo-poo, whatever. So about a block away, suddenly this crow flies straight at us and drops a walnut at our feet. And I remember, oh yeah, I asked this crow if they wanted help. I'd open the walnut for them. So I attempt to start stomping on it in the street, and I can't get it to break. It will not break. And it was kind of hilarious because it would shoot out from under my foot. I have to go get it and try it again. So then I finally found a rock and started hammering on the thing. Now, I didn't even realize there was another crow with this one that had dropped the walnut. As soon as I started hammering on this thing, the companion crow took off. He was like, that's enough for me. I don't want to stick around for this. And I finally smashed the thing open. And the crow that had dropped the walnut was just watching from a branch the whole time. And of course, we walked away so he could come and get his walnut. So again, just crazy. I mean, just reaching out to animals on a walk happens all the time. I'll just reach out and ask for animals to come see me or show me that they can hear me. Or I'll just go on a walk and say, I want to see something magical today, and something will happen. It's pretty fun.
That's a cool story. I like that one.
Yeah, and it took me a while to get that it was probably 10 minutes trying to get that darn walnut open. So he was being very patient with our antics of getting that walnut open for him.
That poor crow's like, what do I got to fly up to space to drop this thing? And then he's like, oh, wait, someone is offering help. Hold on a second. So, all right. So, how about the snake and the raspberries?
So we actually have a lot of garter snakes in my neighborhood. And so in the spring, I'll see several of them, from babies to adults. And at the time, I had chickens, and chickens do not like snakes, I just want to say. And they will surround the poor things and harass them. And so I've had to rescue several snakes from my chickens in the past. I now have a dog who loves to sniff out snakes and harass them. So I have to rescue the snakes from her often. But one day I was watering. We don't get a lot of rain in the summer, so you always have to water your plants. And so I was watering the yard. I walked past, we have a row of raspberries. I walked past these raspberries and I noticed a snake take off and go into the raspberries. So I got down on my hands and knees and went looking for it. And I found it, and it had raised its head up about 8 inches off the ground. It was in grass and raspberries, like I said. So I couldn't see the rest of the body, just its head and its 8 inches of neck. And I started telling it, warning it about the chickens that are in the yard, because they'll hurt you. They'll go after you. And that snake didn't move. It didn't even flick its tongue out. It just stood stock still. I was communicating with it. I was trying to send it images of what chickens look like, to watch out for them, and it didn't move. And my alarm went off, which means 15 minutes are up. I have to go move the water. So I told the snake, don't go anywhere. I still want to communicate with you. I'll be right back. And so I ran off to go move my water, and I came back, and that snake hadn't moved, which shocked me right there. I was like, oh my gosh, the snake really is listening to me. So I started talking to it again, and I said, but I'm all right. You don't have to be afraid of me. I can see you. So you go about and do what you need to do. And at that moment, and it hadn't moved its tongue once, and I'd probably been talking to it for about 10 minutes, it started flicking its tongue. And I said, oh, great, you're getting comfortable with me. You can go out your way. I won't bother you, but please watch out for the chickens. And then it just slithered off. So that just amazed me right there, that this snake was connected, was listening to me. It was definitely getting my message about the chickens, because it was not moving. And basically, I was warning it, if you see chickens, just don't move, because once they spot you, they'll all come running and attack. So everything that I conveyed to that snake, it did. And when I told it could relax, it started flicking its tongue. When I said, go on your way, whatever you want to do, it left. So that was a lot of fun. A lot of fun with that snake. Oh, that reminds me of another story. Another snake. I was watering again, and it was near the house. I was pouring water into a certain plant, and it started raising its head, and I got the hit from it. Sometimes I'm not even looking to communicate with them. I got the hit from it that it was extremely thirsty, and it actually knew what the water was. And I was like, I need a drink. And so I just poured water on the stone that it was on, and it started slurping it up. So you can get hits like that too. You're not even expecting it, and you can get hits like that. And I'll tell you what, most people probably have communicated with their animals at some point, where you swear that your animal understood exactly what you were saying, or you get a hit from them and you're like, I know what my dog needs. I know what my cat needs. So most people have communicated with their animals. It's pretty rare for an animal loving person not to have accidentally or on purpose communicated with their animals.
Now, when you say you get a hit, is this kind of like, I mean, it wouldn't be a voice in your head, I suppose, but do you get a picture of what they need essentially, or what they're trying to say?
Yeah, it can be both, because it's an energy that's coming to you, right? And it's just how you interpret it, or your filters. So sometimes it actually is a voice in my head that is not me. I wasn't thinking about it. I was just noticing the snake was raising its head, and I was watering, and suddenly, like, I'm thirsty. So let me say it this way. Usually if you're talking to animals, you want to take the first thing that comes into your head. because when you start doubting what you just heard, then your own thoughts are taking over, and that is you. Normally in an animal communication, it's the first thing that comes in that I believe more than the rest of the stuff, because that could be you making stuff up or you doubting yourself.
Mm.
And so, like I said, I wasn't even thinking about this snake being thirsty. I mean, normally I don't see snakes drinking. I mean, they can. Usually they get their moisture from their prey, but it was just I just got this sense and this and words. I'm pretty sure words came into my head like I am thirsty. And that's my interpretation. Now the snake itself might not have said that, but its need was so strong it just showed up for me. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. So, yeah, let's talk about the more unexpected side of animal communication. And for this one, you have cats listed.
Yeah, so you never know what's going to come through when you're having a session. And that's one of the reasons I don't want to know the details. Some people want to write a book when they're trying to, they want to tell you everything about their animal, and I'm like, "No, I don't want to know, because then I get in my head and I can't be positive then that I'm hearing from the animal if I already know part of their story. And not only that, it's the human story. And I don't want to be influenced by the human until we are in a three-way conversation with their animal there too, because I want to get their response as the humans telling the story. Because what the human says could be very different than how the animal interprets what happened or why they're doing something. So when I can hear the story with the animal there, then I I'm listening to that and I'm presenting it to the animal in a way that I think they can understand. Like I'll send them pictures of what the human is saying versus sending them words. So I'm interpreting the human's words into pictures and showing the animal and trying to get stuff back. So a lot of interesting stuff can come forward when you're doing that. I had a friend who lost her sister to an accident. There were two cats that her sister had, and she took in one of them, and there was another sister in the family. She took in the second one. My friend wanted to know what happened. Why did her sister die? And the cats were present in the house. So she wanted to talk to the cats or the cat that she had about what happened to her sister. I was pretty fresh in animal communication. So I contacted a couple of my colleagues who did the apprenticeship with me and said, "Hey, would you like to help me talk to uh, this cat about what happened on the day or the time around their human's death?" Usually when I do that kind of stuff, I don't know what's going to come forward, so I don't usually have the client on the phone in case we need to talk details, especially on a death like that, details about it that might upset them, because I don't know what's going to come forward. So I sat down with two of my colleagues, and again, what we usually do is we talked about what we were going to do and some of the questions that we were going to ask of the cat. Then we all went our separate ways and did our connecting meditation, right? We'll call it the cat George. So here, George, it's me. My name's Denise. I'm going to talk to you about what happened to your human, what happened in the house, that kind of thing. And so when we came back together, the three of us, we were talking about what kind of hits we were getting from the cat right away, what kind of personalities. One of us mentioned, and I don't remember who, but one of us goes, "The sister that died just came through for me." In other words, in spirit, she came through and was part of the meditation. And then the other two of us were like, "That happened for us too." So all three of us had my friend's sister come forward and start talking to us in spirit. And that just blew our minds right there because we weren't expecting it. We were here to talk to a cat, not to the sister that had passed. So the session that we then did was talking to the sister and talking to the cat. And so we'd ask a question and then see what we get from either the cat or the sister or both. It was some really interesting information. Now, this woman worked in corrections, and so she was, forget what the name of it is, but she worked with a lot of the criminals out of jail, And so when she was found dead in her home, the first thing they thought was that somebody had come in and killed her, one of her clients in the criminal system,
Mm.
justice system, right? What is that called? I can't remember what that's called. You have to report into them every.
Parole.
Thank you. Yes, a parole officer. So they had actually found the sister at the bottom of her basement steps, dead. It looked like she had hit her head somehow and bled out. And so, since we had the sister right there, we were asking her questions about her death. And she said that her knee had given out and she just fell down the stairs and hit her head. It was nobody's fault. Because one of the things my friend was concerned about was, did the cats trip her up? Because the cat that she had was pretty old and he was always underfoot. And so she was concerned, did the cat actually get in the way and trip her up? And so the sister's like, no, it had nothing to do with the kitties. We also talked to her about what was going on for the kitties, because, of course, all these police officers show up at the house and they're traipsing through trying to figure that, taking evidence, whatever. Because, of course, the sister didn't show up for work. And when they found her, she's could have been a murder victim. The cats, and this really amazed my friend, that the cats didn't leave. The cats hid in the house. They didn't try to escape. They didn't try to go out all the open doors that people were walking through. They could have easily slipped out of the house and just been gone. And so, we talked to the sister about that, the sister in spirit. And she said, yes, I hung around to keep my kitties safe. I didn't want them to be harmed. So I told them to just hide and hunker down until family members could come and get them. And so when we reported all these things to my friend, she said, yeah, you guys were right on. My sister did have a bad knee. It was always going out on her. Yeah, those kitties were so calm after all that commotion in the house. They were calm. Let us come get them, easily get them out of the house. They've melded into our family and the other cats in our house really well. And so she just confirmed with us that we were probably really in touch with the sister in spirit, and we're getting the information correct. So that was something that just came through. We were not expecting it. And suddenly we're talking to the deceased sister and the cat at the same time.
Well, and it's a huge relief to realize that she was not murdered, of course.
Yes.
To her
And,
family, yeah.
Yeah.
So before we close with any thoughts that you had, and I'm sure that any further information you had for people to help them connect with their own animals, or maybe crows that you would rather they not, on their shoulder. I just had a couple of random questions for you.
Sure.
Because I see you as essentially Ace Ventura, in the scene where he's like, come to me, my jungle friends, and he's covered in every creature you can think of. So if you went into an animal shelter and you walk down that row of all the dogs that need adopting, and 3/4 of them probably have horrible stories, what's that going to be like for you? Because it's the same question that I would ask a psychic that works with people, right? Like,
Right.
they're like, well, I have to put a wall up. I have to kind of, turn the volume down or shut it off. What happens if you go into a place like that? Or have you tried that and seen what would happen?
I have not done it on purpose like that, just to see what happens. Again, yeah, you can shut it off. Not that some really strong communication won't pop through. And in fact, that's actually how I adopted the dog that I have right now. And that was that was really fun. We went to the animal shelter and I was looking at 2 other dogs because they were so cute, right? The pictures and stuff. Turned out it was 2-for-1 sale on cats that day. So it was busy. We had to wait 3 hours even to see the dogs we were there to see. So my spouse convinced me, let's go look at all the dogs. And I'm like, no, I don't want to go in, because then I want to just bring them all home. And you don't know how it's going to hit you, especially as a psychic. You really do, there's ways to close yourself down and turn it off. But, what were we going to do for 3 hours? So I said, yes, I'll go in. We found the 2 dogs that we wanted to see. They're in their cages, and, I tried to call out to them, try to be as open as I could, right? I want to come see you. We could be your new home. They were not interested at all. They didn't even come over and say hi. we went around to the back area, and there were a couple of Chihuahua mixes in a kind of different cage. It was plexiglass instead of bars. It turns out that they were actually in quarantine. And one of them, this little fawn colored one, just went crazy. She was jumping up and down and trying to lick us through the little crack between the plexiglass and the metal side of the. She just was so happy to see us. We're like, wow, I think this dog wants to come home with us. So when we went back out to talk to the volunteers at the shelter, we're like, this dog's name was, I don't know, they called her Lenore. They named all the dogs an L name that came that week. And we're like, we want to see Lenore. And they're like, no, she's not in our system. And finally, somebody that actually worked there came by and said, oh, well, she's in quarantine. She's not up for adoption until we can spay her. And we can't spay her right now because she has kennel cough. So we did go see a couple of the dogs that we were looking at, and they were not interested in us. And that's where I would be open, right? Because I'm trying to adopt a dog and I want them to know who I am and do you want to come live with us? They were not interested in us at all. We found out that Lenora was going to be up for adoption like on a Tuesday. And so as soon as it was Tuesday, we put a hold on her because we wanted to go and see her. And it was perfect. Perfect, Shannon. We went into the greeting room, where you can be with the animal. And she came over and sat on our laps and gave us licks. And then she'd run around the room and sniff things. And these other dogs were just so frightened of just being in the room. They just cower in the corner. She was just full of energy. And then she'd come sit in our laps again and give us licks. And we're like, okay, she's coming home with us. So, yeah, you have to. And I don't usually walk around, I'm like most humans, I'm walking around with stuff in my head all the time. So unless an animal is really yelling at me and really wants me to notice and something comes through, I'm not always paying attention. But when I really focus my intention is to go out and have some kind of interaction with an animal, I just reach out to any animal that I see or just say, hey, is there anybody? Well, this happens to me all the time. I will watch birds of prey circling. We have eagles here and all kinds of hawks. And so I'll watch them circling in the distance. And I'll just reach out and say, hey, I would love it if you came and circled over me. And they will make a beeline, circle once over the top of me, and then go back to what they were doing. And it happens more than it does not. Again, they're wild animals. They can do what they want. They can just ignore your request. But it happens more often than it does not. And I just send out my appreciation to them and thank them for doing that. So it just depends on where you are and whether, you're open or closed to it.
All right. So you are a biologist. You have a master's in fisheries. I have a question, but it might be a really dumb question. Have you work a lot with different kinds of fish, trout, salmon. You and I have had conversations about these different expeditions that you have to go out on for work. Have you ever, or can you, tap into fish in any way, even if it's just to hear their instinctual thoughts?
Yes, I have. And in several different ways. One time, and I just love the tropics and I love snorkeling and scuba diving. And so, of course, fish are everywhere. This one time I was in Costa Rica and we were actually going out on a dolphin tour. And because of the way the dolphins acted that day, we actually convinced the boat operator that we were legit animal communicating with these dolphins. He's like, I've never seen our dolphins do that before. So he was converted by the end of the trip. But what I came away with on that particular trip was first they took us to a reef where we could snorkel, and then they took us out to the dolphin area. And I was just swimming along and noticed this fish coming towards me. And I just got this hit of fear, just overwhelming, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be attacked. I thought it was mine at first, but then I realized it wasn't mine. It was coming from the fish. The fish had a huge fear when it saw me. And so I reached out and, it's okay. I'm just here to observe you. You're so beautiful. And then the fish just swam on by and all was good. But that sometimes you don't know if it's coming from you or from the animal. And so knowing yourself real well, and that's why meditation helps, because you spend some time grounding yourself. You understand what parts of your body might be hurting that day. So you're aware of it. It's not coming from the animal. That's my stuff. How am I feeling emotionally? Am I ready to do a session? And so you, you need to know yourself so that you know what is yours and what is theirs. And so, yeah, I've certainly had fish communicate with me. If I've been out on like deep sea trips out in the ocean, off the shore of Oregon, and my spouse and I were out there with her working crew where she used to work, and there were a few other people on the boat fishing, and we were up front, and it was just two of us, and then there were a couple other guys that were, I don't know if they were that serious about fishing, but they were out there too, and we just basically said to the fish, if there's anybody today that wants to sacrifice themselves as food for us, we would appreciate it. What was interesting was they were fishing just as much as we were. They only caught like two fish, and we actually maxed out and had to stop fishing.
You're
And
showing up there. They're
basically
like, what is going on?
we're basically right next to them, right? Our lines are only a few feet apart, and they weren't catching anything. And we were hauling them in like crazy. And of course, I always thank animals and even plants for their sacrifice to feed me, because like a carrot is alive. You put it in the ground, it'll grow. So I'm always thanking the animals and the plants that have given themselves up that I can live and eat.
So before you give out your website and how people should contact you, please let us know any closing thoughts on animal communication.
Yeah, I did write it down, a few things just for people to think about when they're trying to communicate with animals or just working with their own animals. I already told you the story about using the word don't. So you want to say what you want, not what you don't want. So you want to, if your cat's jumping on the counter, you want to convey to them to stay on the floor. When you're in the kitchen, it's 4 on the floor. You want to speak it out loud. I know it sounds silly. People are going to go, you're talking to your dog again. But if you speak it out loud and you say what you want them to do, uh, pictures come into your head. And that's what they're interpreting. They're interpreting your emotions and your pictures, and they'll get it. It'll be more clear to them. Always tell your animals what's happening. Like if you're leaving for work today, you can say, I'll be back at 8, or I'll be back at 5, or I'm coming home at lunch. I'll see you then. If you've got people coming over, say what they are, that we're going to have some strange men come on over and they're going to be working on the refrigerator or something. It really does help them. And I think you even brought this up. You want to be careful about turning animals into humans. Yes, they can communicate with you, but because they are a particular species, they're going to have their own instincts to do things, just like we do. And they have personalities. We talked about the two conures with very different personalities. All of my chickens had very different personalities. All of my cats have had very different personalities, even though they're the same species. A lot of times people misinterpret species behaviors as they put it into a human context. So you really want to be careful about turning your animal's behavior into something humans do. I get this all the time. Oh, my animal is jealous. They always show up to get love when Spot over here always comes in and butts in when I'm giving Fifi love. Animals don't have jealousy. All they're doing is wanting to get in on that love session because of who they are, or the species that they are. They're going to act a certain way. They'll just butt right in. They don't know that it's rude because you're working with the other animal. Now you could certainly say, hey, I'm with Fifi right now. I will give you love in a little bit. You'll get just as much. But they're not jealous. There's no such thing as jealousy. That's a human thing. As I said before, always picture what you want and say it out loud. Always speak your truth to the animal. If you're taking your animal to the vet and you don't know what's going to happen, don't tell them it's going to be okay. They could get pricked, or something else could happen. Give them a shot and that really hurts. Just say you don't know what's going to happen, but it's for your good. It's for your keeping you healthy. You need to get a vaccine. Just let them know the truth. I talked about this before. Be in the moment with your animal. I mean, humans are, it's a, there's been studies where humans can't even spend 5 minutes alone without looking at their phones, right? Put them in a chair and just ask them to just be in the room. And they can't take it for more than 5 minutes. They have to go do something. Animals are in the moment and they just want to be with you. So put your phones down, go get off away from your computer, take your dog out and just be with the dog, be with nature, be with the dog, be on your walk and ask for magic to happen. And it often does. I think we already talked a little bit about intentions. Animals often will pick up on your intentions versus what you're trying to say to them. So you want that to match. You don't want to say everything's good and they can feel from you that everything is not good, or you're out telling an animal you're not going to hurt it when you end up doing that. You don't necessarily do it on purpose, but in the manner that, I'm not going to do anything that'll bother you, and then you catch it or something and it doesn't like that. So watch what your intentions are and what your words and actions, how they match your intentions or don't match your intentions. If you want to ask a question of an animal, you need to ground yourself. Breath is very important. Take a deep breath, ground yourself. As I said, the first thing that comes into your head is probably most likely what came from the animal. And and it takes practice to grab that information and not let it go, because our busy human minds will start doubting it, dismissing it. I didn't really hear that. That's not what's really going on. And we blow right past that actual communication from the animal and go on to our busy minds making stuff up. So it's usually that first thing that comes to your head, and it's not your voice. It just pops in. You weren't even thinking about that. The thoughts come later, and those are yours. One thing that you don't want to do to animals, and this can be really hard, right? Like walking into a shelter and going, I want to help everybody. Well, you want to be careful not to communicate with an animal that you're going to help them when you have no way of helping that animal. So, in other words, I won't talk to somebody about their neighbor's dog, because there's nothing I and the person on the session can do for that dog. That's ethically, you want to have that human that is with that dog that can actually help the dog. So in those situations, I usually ask the universe to intervene, because I can't do anything about an animal in distress if they belong to another person.
Right.
Now, yes, you can. You can call the Humane Society and things like that. You definitely want to do that. But if you're noticing an animal next door is kind of neglected, people aren't, and animals have just as much control over their lives as humans do. They can make things happen. And so if you remind that animal that they can work on getting themselves out of a situation, or if they need help, do this, show up here. I've heard stories about people that are communicating with the animal next door and saying, if you really need my help and there's a way for you to get out and show up, then I can help you. And within a couple of weeks, the dog's like sitting on their front stoop or something, right? And clearly helped itself get to help. So you just want to be careful not to promise things that you can't do anything about, because that's not fair to the animal. And like I said before, just going out and sending love and admiration to an animal and see what happens. You might be very surprised. I've again, with crows, crows are really intelligent, but I've done that with crows, just sending love and admiration, and then watch them fly right back to you and land on a tree branch or a wire just above you, and spend time with you. It's pretty magical.
Yeah, as much as I love birds, I would love to be able to execute some kind of fill the backyard with crows. I would feed them till the end of time if I could execute that. So, Well, Denise, I wanted to, before you give out your information, tell you, just say thank you for the session that we had together. There are still things from that session that I am still implementing with my wonderful, very, very loved feathered friends that I have here with me, my feathered family, I should say. But please give out your website and any contact info that's pertinent.
Yeah, my website is One Anima. So that's ONE and then like the word animal without the L.com. And you can also contact me by email at one.anima.ic@gmail.com. Or I have a phone number 503-236-3281. I've been listening to your show for quite a while now. It's got me through the pandemic. And I just want to say that there's a lot of crazy stuff out there that we don't understand. And I got into science and biology to try to understand it, but I never thought I would actually be in the woo-woo category. But I sure am enjoying it, and I've just been enjoying listening to people's experiences. There's still a lot for us to know and figure out, and hopefully enjoy.
Well, yeah, and just my closing thoughts. Everybody that might be on the fence about this, just reach out to Denise, give it a try. I was utterly blown away. So, and I wanted to say thanks again for that, Denise, for probably the umpteenth time today. But it was very eye opening for me, and I truly enjoyed it. On top of that, because I really felt like there was some real communication going on with my birds, and I felt like I really understood them better, which for me was priceless. So, thank you for that.
You are so